Welcome to another episode of Teeth Talk with the Dental Pro. I'm Dr. Kurt Kaser.
And I'm Dr. Caroline Kaser.
And I'm Jordan Ochoa. And today we are going to be talking to Dr. Caroline Kaser, who is an oral surgeon and owner here at Dental Pros. So, Dr. Caroline, question, how do you balance being an oral surgeon, a mom, and a business owner?
It's a great question. It's tough. I know multiple mothers out there who also balance and juggle multiple things. I think the key is, and I know it's probably repeated over and over again, but I think balancing your work life and your home life is certainly important. You know, there's going to be times when your work life kind of takes over a little bit, but then you got to balance that out with spending a little more time at home. For me, I modify my work schedule, so I take Grace to school. So I don't start at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. I start at 9, and then I'm the one who picks her up. And Kurt, which God bless Kurt, a lot of dads don't participate. You know, some of them do, some of them don't, but Kurt does, and he picks up Grace on Thursdays. So between the two of us, we've carved out some time in our work life to make sure that we're there for Grace, and that she can kind of be part of our lives. And I didn't want her to be raised by a nanny. I didn't want her to be raised by someone else. And so for us, we just made it important. It was important for us to be able to balance that life. And a lot of meetings are done like super early in the morning. You know, you might catch me and Kurt be like, "Oh, it's 6 a.m. She's still asleep. Let's talk shop." You know.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how we do it. It's not a consistent thing where I just pound myself with work, but I do insert myself randomly throughout the day in random hours just to be able to juggle it off. Yeah. Juggle it off.
I like it. It's good. Awesome.
Cool. Couple clinical questions for you.
Okay.
Clinical questions for you today.
Clinical.
One of the things I think that we hear a lot about is clenching and grinding, just in the general population, you know, as well too. And obviously, you know, in the dental field, that's where the questions are directed. So when somebody has clenching and grinding and they notice that, or they see some things that are happening with their teeth, what kind of options are there to help alleviate those signs and symptoms, especially if somebody's in pain from it as well too?
So I'm very conservative with any type of approach with any type of clenching or grinding, which we call TMJD, which is temporomandibular joint disorder. And you know, a lot of times people want an easy fix, but what they don't realize is that they've gotten themselves into the situation over time. So, you know, you got a kid, usually it's a female, it's usually in their teens, and there's tests, there's stress, there's bullying, there's lots of things that, you know, you don't realize that, you know, how does your body cope? How does your body cope with that? And a lot of times we just you start to clench right here. And this muscle here, your masseter muscle, starts to get a little bit bigger, starts to get a little achy. And the first sign, which a lot of people probably don't see, is like when they bite into that bagel or they're biting into that pizza or that baguette, and if they feel that tightness here in their jaw, they probably have been clenching. Okay. By the time I see this patient, they've typically been clenching for probably several years, and it probably comes and goes. It has ebbs and flows. So, you know, like maybe it was hurting for 1 second, they tell their mother or they tell their father, and then all of a sudden it's gone. So then they don't do anything about it. So this probably goes on for quite a bit of time, and then finally it's like, oh my gosh, Mom, it really, really, really hurts. And so basically it's a habit that we do in order to cope with stress. And it's not just stress, you know, our body as well. If you're someone who's obese or overweight, you snore, you have maybe obstructive sleep apnea, which I think a lot of people will see around the social media. Oh, you got this device here, you got this, this, and this. But what people don't understand is your body has mechanisms to tell you to breathe. You know, there's probably series that you don't, but I also see a lot of clenchers are ones who have that obstructive sleep apnea as well. And so the idea, I mean, you have to identify, where is this coming from? Is it this teenager who's stressed out? She's got, you know, she's clenching her jaw, or is it this overweight individual who maybe has an obstructive sleep apnea? So for me, I would treat those patients differently. I'm not going to put some kind of device on this patient with obstructive sleep apnea when he probably needs to go to a sleep clinic and get a study, and then they'll probably do a completely different appliance at first. The first point for him would be or her would be to breathe, right? And with this this teenage girl who is clenching and grinding, for me, it would be to make her a night guard. Okay, a night guard's nice and hard. It's soft on the inside, the ones that we develop here. And what we do is it's so if you close your eyes and you really do clench on it, it triggers your mouth to actually open. And so it does it's kind of almost to stop, it's to stop that habit that they tend to have. And that's what I would start with first. I'm very conservative. We start also with limiting diet, maybe some NSAIDs, which are non-steroidal and anti-inflammatories that we would do as well. And it has to be monitored by a dentist. I think people go out into the public and like, oh, I found this, cheap. I was at the supermarket and I found this night guard, but it's really a mouth guard, and it's not. It encourages clenching and grinding. So one, you got to see a professional, and two, you really need to be monitored, because sometimes you wear this appliance and never seen again, and then the teeth cause and do different things, and we worry about that.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit on, because a common statement that you hear from people is that their teeth hurt as well too, along with the muscles. Can you talk a little bit more about why they get the teeth hurting?
Sure. So typically what happens is when you clench and you grind, you bite down hard on the teeth. And our teeth are made of a bunch of little fibers that insert the tooth into the bone. And so over time, when you constantly kind of hit those teeth, or you hit those fibers, they stretch a little bit, and they stretch a little bit more, and when they start to hurt, it's because they've almost overstretched from repetitious type of grinding or clenching. And if you have a tooth out of alignment, for example, that's probably going to be the first one that's hurting first. And so sometimes they'll identify as a one tooth or two, or one side versus the complete mouth. And so that's what you typically see.
So you have like the muscles doing little micro movements all day, and then the teeth are the ones that are taking the force.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine just like holding this cup like this forever, like multiple, like just balancing it?
Yeah.
That muscle structure over time is just super tired and super worn out. And the teeth will start to give a little bit of movement, and that little bit of movement is what causes the pain.
And I know you talked a little bit in the beginning about biting into a bagel or a baguette or bread, right? And that's when they a lot of times first notice it, right? Like the pain and the signs and symptoms.
Yeah.
So is that what's happening? Like the muscles are now giving you that feedback?
Yeah, but it's that chronic condition where it's that ebbs and flow that I was talking about, where they probably have had that before, but by the time it gets to that, when they're biting into that baguette, they've had that pain probably less intense multiple times on and off. So that's what I'm saying. By the time that's when when it interferes with their daily. That's when I see them. It's because
it's gotten out of control,
and it's uncomfortable. Yeah.
And at that point, they need to go see a dentist, oral surgeon, whoever it is,
absolutely,
to help alleviate that.
Yeah, and I think too, like a lot of times, like mine, I'm pretty holistic. I treat the patient as a whole. It's like, what are you doing in your life? Like, I can make this night guard for you, but what else are you going to do to help yourself? Like, is it putting yourself into situations where you're chronically stressed? Like, maybe you need to work out. Maybe we work on stretching. I mean, you do 2 or 3 minutes of stretching, yoga, those alpha waves produce in your brain, and those waves will allow your body to actually relax, which will indirectly relax your muscles of your face. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you see like a patient or just a person in general out in public and be like, that person probably clenches their jaw? Is there like a telling sign?
So there is a telling sign, and it's typically the muscles themselves are just larger. Yeah. And so the face now becomes a little bit more round. Some individuals will inject Botox into the master muscle if they think that's the reason why. But I really like to address, I don't like to mask problems with I like to get to the problem. Like, what is going on? What's the root of this problem? Like, how can we get to the point where you aren't clenching and grinding anymore, and not just to mask it? So typically, you can see that in certain individuals. I wouldn't just jump up to that person like, oh my gosh, you must be clenching, because some people are just, they naturally have larger master muscles, right? So I probably wouldn't jump to that, But sometimes it's a telltale sign. You can see it. And sometimes, you can see you can see the muscle clench while you're talking to them. Maybe you're talking to someone it's an uncomfortable conversation, right? Yeah. If there's confrontation, they're super uncomfortable, and you'll just see them, right there, right there. It's crazy. Oh. So, yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, absolutely.
So if you are having any TMJ problems, we would invite you to call us here at Dental Pros, 520-290-8787. We have plenty of physicians to see you, be able to take care of you in a conservative way, and be able to point out some ways to get better and hopefully alleviate some of that pain.
And if you want to hear more about these podcasts with Teeth Talk, just go ahead and like and subscribe.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.